So you're looking to get into vintage motorcycles, looking to get into collecting perhaps, buying your first couple, buying your first one, and you're wondering where to start. If this is your first time on the channel, I own a whole host of vintage motorcycles, and well, they're a little quirky and they can take some time to really understand what they're all about, but in all fairness, the motorcycles mechanically are very simple. Now, the first thing I'd like to break down, if you don't know where to start, don't know what to start with, don't know what brand to go with, don't know what era to go with, I want to break it down for you a little bit. Anything really before the 1930s is a really antique, almost bicycle looking motorcycle. Motorcycles like that are probably not even bikes we're really talking about in a video like this, but I mean, they are really, really cool. I personally don't know too much about that era of motorcycles simply because they're really rare. There's not a lot of those bikes still left in existence. The ones that are in the hands of private collectors, or they're simply just junk. Moving on to the 30s, 40s, there was a lot of innovation happening at the time. Motorcycles started getting bigger, more powerful, and they even started racing them and really getting up to some serious speeds at the time. Around this time was when the BSA Gold Star was created, and the BSA Gold Star would average over 100 miles per hour on a racetrack. At this time, Vincent also came out, and honestly, the British companies were killing it in this time period. Yes, Harley was still around and made some of the most beautiful bikes that they ever made at the time. Indian was doing some crazy stuff here in America as well. A lot of companies came and went, but when you think about this time, from the 30s to the 50s or 60s, the British motorcycles are really the bikes I would keep your eye on. Getting into the 50s, we started to get things like suspension, plunger suspension, and really getting into some of the more modern bikes. This was the time the Japanese really started to get into motorcycles. They started to create bikes and was the first iterations of things like Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki. A lot of those Japanese bikes are going to be two-strokers, other than Honda. By the time the 60s came around, a lot of the British companies started to struggle a lot. The economy started to go in a bad place, the company started to overspend and engineer in the wrong way, and the Japanese were making cheaper, more reliable, faster bikes. By the time the 70s came around, this was really the era of the Japanese bike. If you're looking to get a bike of the 70s or even the late 60s, the Japanese vintage bikes are some of the best bikes to start and begin a collection with. But we'll get into that in just a second. The 80s rolled around and the Japanese were doing some of the craziest stuff ever. V4 race bikes, V3 two-strokes, lots of crazy innovation. V4 two-strokes. I mean, it was absolutely insane, the bikes that were coming out of Japan at this time. The 80s was a real time of innovation, and it was a real departure from the bikes of the 70s. But at this time, the Italian bikes really started to take a major upgrade compared to what they were making. I mean, we look at Ducatis from the 70s, and they made really cool motorcycles, but we can see a drastic change in how they were making bikes in this time and leading up to the 90s. In the 90s, these Italian companies like MV Agusta, Cagiva, Ducati, were really paving the path in terms of design and styling, and we really started to get the sport bike and what we see as a modern sport bike. At the time in the 70s, they were kind of like standard bikes. Going into the 80s, they started to shape and get fairings and get lower clip-ons. And then by the time the 90s came around, we had some of the most pure, raw sport bikes that were ever created. That followed into the early 2000s, and after that, I think you start to lose the flavor of the vintage bike. Now, the 90s and 2000s bikes are more retro than classic. If you're looking to begin a collection of vintage motorcycles, the first place I would begin is honestly a motorcycle from the 70s from Japan. And I would begin with Honda. Now, we're all gonna have our favorites, but the one company I would stay away from would be Kawasaki. Kawasaki's are a little overinflated at this moment in time. I think they're starting to ride their wave downwards. The motorcycles really got expensive for a while, and the prices have started to climb down astronomically. If you're a fan of the Kawasaki bikes, there are a few good options to buy. The Kawasaki H1, I would say, is a pretty safe bet, but the H2, the Z1, the KZ900 have really done a up and down in the market, and well, it's hard to dictate what's going to really happen with it. I don't see it going back up like crazy, and I see them leveling out and kind of staying where they are, but they might fall more. It's hard to tell. This is a very weird time in the vintage bike market. Bikes aren't selling and you can get really good deals on them, but then again, 3-4 more months from now, they could get even cheaper than they are right now. This floor has really fallen. Over the last 2-3 years, the bikes have kind of done a little bit of a downward, and you can pick up some of these rare, super special bikes for really cheap prices, and I think that there's only one way for some of these bikes to go, and that's up. The Honda CB lineup is somewhere where I would immediately recommend someone to go. Whether it's a CB450 or whether you want to get yourself into a 4-cylinder like the CB750, the CB750 paved the path for all the bikes that we see now. So if you're looking to get yourself a legend, the CB750, since they made so many of them, are still available at some pretty decent price points. You can buy a bike that perhaps is missing the original pipes, order some repop pipes, and really take care of it, polish it up, go through the maintenance, and make it a really nice bike, and I think that bike can only hold or go up in value. So many of these CB750s over the last 20 years primarily have just been destroyed, and I think honestly, coming into this next little portion here, nice CB750s will once again rise in value. CB750s started their way up, kind of came on their way down recently, and I see them going back up for nice examples, rare colors, rare years, low production years, all those kind of things. They made a lot of the bikes, but a lot of them were also destroyed. Now, before we get into this next point, I would like to say if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, please go down and subscribe because it helps more than you can even imagine. But not only that, we officially have dropped the rotary hats. I've been wearing these for about a year, and I've had many people ask, where can I pick one of those up? I have launched them on the Vintage Racing Club website. We also have dropped stickers, and of course, our house tees are always live. Suzuki's probably the most slept on brand out of the big four. They've made some of the greatest bikes of the era, and yet you can still pick a lot of their bikes up, especially their 4-strokes, for really cheap. You can pick up an 80s Suzuki for less than $2,000 in nice condition. Even if you are a fan of the British stuff, there's something to love with the Japanese bikes, and well, getting into some of the British motorcycles, a fantastic place to start with that is knowing some mechanical knowledge, because you're gonna need it. But talking actually about the bikes, one of the bikes that comes immediately to my mind is a T140 Bonneville or any Triumph Twin, to be honest with you. There was a lot of Triumph Twins produced. The bikes do tend to hold value, and if you're looking for something like a Bonneville, the Bonnevilles can be expensive, but the Tigers can be cheap. The TR6 can be found for a low price. Even sometimes you can get yourself a Bonneville for a realistic price. The T140 Bonneville is a $750. I own one of those motorcycles. I think it's worth somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000. For $3,000 to $5,000, that's a lot of motorcycle in nice condition, in running shape. Those are oil in frame bikes. If you want to find more information about that bike in specific, I'll leave down a video where we talk about it, we work on it a little bit. But there's a lot of discrepancies, a lot of like small, minor things that can affect the bike's value, the years, the frame designs, the motor designs, all of those kind of things. I like to break down British bikes into 2 categories when it comes to companies like BSA and Triumph, and that's unit bikes and pre-unit bikes. Unit construction bikes are the later bikes. When it comes to unit construction BSAs, there's a certain buyer for them out there, but the majority of people who buy BSA, I find, prefer the pre-unit bikes. This was when they were at their best. This was when they were selling numbers like crazy, and it was the company, right? I think those pre-unit bikes, based on the demographic that is next up to buy these motorcycles, is going to prefer those. And I see those bikes holding or going up in value, and these unit bikes fluctuate quite a bit when it comes to BSA and even Triumph. Triumph has such a big name and reputation for themselves. Fun fact, BSA owned Triumph at that time, but the Triumph bikes were really good. BSA did go under, and their offerings, they just weren't the greatest when it came down to those unit construction bikes, and Triumph was killing it, in my opinion. But even that being said, I think the pre-unit Triumphs, they're just a little bit more pretty, and I think in the future, those would be the bikes to have if you could find them. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comment section. Whenever I see a BSA unit construction, they sit on the market quite a bit. They're really hard sells, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, because I usually find that people find the pre-unit construction bikes prettier, collectors find those to be more influential, and other than riding, I'm sure those bikes ride phenomenally. There's not too many people looking for them. I think the one exception in that would be the Rocket 3, but I mean, it's a Rocket 3, it's a cool bike, right? But those twins, I see them being hard sells, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, when it comes to things like Norton Manx, BSA Gold Star, and we can even kind of throw the Vincent Black Shadow in there. I call these the blue chip collector bikes. These are motorcycles that are at the top of the pyramid. They're the collector bikes. Like, these are the ones that you'd want to have if you were a collector. I was fortunate enough to pick up a BSA Gold Star last year. It's been an awesome experience with that bike. But those bikes are at the bottom of their depreciation curve. I truly believe that. Those bikes have fallen so much in value over the last year and a half, 2 years here. BSA Gold Stars are primarily seeing a huge depreciation, and that's why I was able to pick up my bike. But they really came down in value. Even things like the Vincents and all of those, they're struggling right now, but those are the blue chip bikes. I genuinely don't see a world that those bikes don't go right back to where they were or don't swing upwards again. There's so few of them out there. I think there's a couple of things that are influencing the market right now. The main things, the primary things, are a little bit of influx in inventory. A lot of these older guys, unfortunately, this is how it goes, they're starting to pass away. And when they do, they leave behind the bikes that they were never going to sell. A big majority of the owners are people who can no longer ride the bikes and just can no longer justify keeping them around, or they do pass away with the bike and the next in line isn't interested in the machine. I've seen so many Vincents listed for sale recently that come up on auction, Gold Stars, that this was my dad's bike, I'm selling it, my dad is too old for this bike, and we are selling it. So there's an influx in the market, and the market also is struggling just in general, and that has caused these bikes specifically to dip. Now, if you're a new collector, I don't necessarily recommend you jump into one of those bikes right away, but if you're looking, perhaps you do own a couple bikes and you're looking to get into the world of collecting these bikes for the pieces of art they are and the riding art that they are, please ride your bikes, or at least bring them out to shows. I can understand if you bought a bike with 1 or 2 miles on it, you're not going to ride it, but Vincent people are really good at this. People who buy Vincents tend to ride them most of the time, but a lot of these British bikes have been hiding, which is yet another reason why they're depreciating. Now that they're coming out, I think that we're going to see a very big push in the world of the British bike here. But if you're someone who owns one of these bikes and you're collecting these bikes and you're looking to collect these bikes, the one thing that brings enthusiasm into these motorcycles is people seeing them. When people see them, they tell stories, and when people tell stories, it makes people around the bike, people listening to them, want to have one for themselves. If you're new into the collecting world or the vintage bike world whatsoever, take your bikes out, ride them. Not only is it healthy for them, but that's what builds the enthusiasm. Whether you own a Honda CB450 or a Vincent Black Shadow, take the bike out, because I can guarantee you someone at a gas station will walk up to you, someone at a bike show will walk up to you, and they will say, wow, I knew someone who used to have one of these. Or if you got a Vincent, they're gonna freak out about it. Because if I saw a Vincent at a Cars and Coffee, I would be drooling over it. But most people wouldn't know what it is. But I'm sure that it would start a crowd, and at least someone would learn something about the bike that you own. And there needs to be more people learning about those bikes. Those bikes' productions were very limited, and the number of them out there is a finite amount. I know I took my Gold Star out to a Cars and Coffee. I had multiple people just looking at the bike, but I was gearing up ready to take the bike out, and they were like, whoa, is that your Gold Star? You brought a Gold Star? And they're like, wow, I used to, I haven't seen one of these in years, or you never see one of these bikes. It's like, that's really cool. Thanks for bringing it out, because no one brings these bikes out anymore. I sit, I contemplate, I think all the time, there's no way that there's not more of these bikes around my area. There's no way that I'm the only one who has one of them in the state. I know for sure I'm not. Where are they though? I'll tell you where they are. They're hiding in someone's garage, unfortunately. Now, I'm sure if you're watching this video and you're looking into getting into the collector aspect, you're getting into your first vintage bike, I'm sure that you know some of the things like maintaining the motorcycles and what breaks and all those things. I made a few videos like that in the past with the reality of kind of owning a vintage bike and what to expect owning a vintage bike, how to do your inspections on some of those motorcycles. And I'll leave those videos in the description. This was more so of a video of like kind of where to start, where to pick your bikes from, how I would recommend you'd start. I'd recommend starting with a Japanese bike if you only have newer bikes, or perhaps you do have some older bikes, but you're looking into getting to 70s, 50s, 60s. I would recommend getting yourself into a Japanese bike or getting yourself onto a little bit more of a popular, not too expensive British bike. With that being said, that's all I have for this video. If you guys enjoyed, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel. Just wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit and just explain a few things for those looking into getting into collecting. You know, half the fun is collecting them and having them and all of this, but the other half of it is showing them, riding them, sharing the experiences with other people. And that's what making these videos on these bikes allows me to do in a way, is to show the bikes, to highlight them, and give you guys details on things that perhaps you wouldn't see, because again, not too many people bring them out. And a perfect way to display them is to display them on the internet for everyone to see. With that said, if you guys did enjoy, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.